supporting individuals during, after, traumatic experiences. They'll offer insights into spiritual care, practices, and diverse settings. So additionally, today's panelists offer special insights, trauma, and spiritual awareness programs. I'm honored to introduce our moderator for today's panel, Mr. Wesley Sun. He is the manager of clinical pastoral education at the University of Chicago Medicine. He's also been engaged in chaplaincy and supervision at Rush University Medical Center, Jackson Park Hospital, Cook County Jail. So in addition to the chaplain training and education experience, Wesley trained religious leaders as the former director of field education and community engagement in the Divinity. So please join me in welcoming.
Oh, thank you, Chaplain Torres. Thank you so much. In a moment, I'm going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves, to say a little bit about their experience, both in military service, spiritual care training, and spiritual care service. I will say that I think that I've been asked to moderate this, not because I have any experience at all in military life or service, but because I am keenly interested in learning from my colleagues. And as I was joking with Chaplain Willis over at lunch, whenever ignorance is the prerequisite for a job, I'm always really up for the challenge. So I am very, very excited to have helped assemble this panel and also got them all together in the same place. Some of you all just met just now, right, before we get. So please, why don't we go down the line and introduce yourselves. Let us know who you are, how you have served, and how you're serving now. Is that on?
Test.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandon Evans. I served 4 years on active duty in the United States Marine Corps, and actually serving in the Marine Corps was actually where I first encountered chaplaincy. My chaplain while I was deployed in 2013 in the Persian Gulf, and I thought I was this little Lance corporal. I was like, oh wow, that's something that I could do possibly. And so here I am more than 10 years later doing the work of chaplaincy, and I truly enjoyed it. I went to Vanderbilt Divinity School, and my dean at the time actually graduated from the University of Chicago Divinity School, Emily Towns, if you all are familiar with her. And then after that, I served some time at Vanderbilt University doing spiritual care there, and then 2 years with the Department of Veteran Affairs, 1 year in acute care. And then the second year, I was on the interdisciplinary team, psychiatric care, veterans with serious mental illness, substance use disorder was my primary focus there. And then I moved here into Chicago, the Windy City, in September, and now I'm at UChicago providing care there. And so I'm really excited for the panel today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Schimmelpfennig. My friends call me Chaps, and I got that from the veterans, so I'm very proud of that. I'm the chaplain at the Road Home program, the Rush Road Home program, the Center of Excellence for Veterans and Families at Rush. What we do there is we take the service members who are suffering from PTSD and moral and spiritual injury from the effects of combat as well as military sexual trauma. We also treat the family unit. We're coming up on our 10th year anniversary. I've been there for just about all of them. It's the most amazing work, and I'm just very grateful and blessed to be part of it. And I am a veteran of the United States Army. Hooah.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Philip Willis. I'm an Army chaplain, reservist. I serve as the chief chaplain at Hines VA Hospital right off of 290. I started there as an intern and worked my way I'll tell you a cool story real quick. I started there as an intern, and when my CPE unit was over, I kept coming. And the chief chaplain was like, why are you still here? I was like, I like it here. He's like, you want to get paid? I was like, yeah. And that's how I got my feet on the ground there. But I've been a chaplain in the Army for 29 years. This month, March 28th, will mark my 29th year. And it's just been a love affair from the beginning till now. And I'm excited about serving. One last thing. Real excited about being at this university, my former president at my first university, and one of the best preachers I ever heard. Dr. Benjamin Reeves got his PhD here in preaching. And the book that he used to teach us was Designed for Preaching by H. Grady Davis. I've never forgot it, and that was more than 30 years ago. So I'm excited about being here with you all.
Great. Thank you. I'm apparently mic'd up, so you guys can share this one among yourselves. I have no choice. I'm going to be projected the whole time. We're going to facilitate a conversation around human vulnerability and resilience, about what you all have learned through your military service, but also your chaplaincy work and spiritual care training. But to get started, I'm going to do what I often do with my students, and for the folks out there who have had the privilege and burden of being a student of mine, you know that I like to begin often with an anecdote that leads with my experience but reveals what I don't know. So I was in the clinic over the holidays. I can't remember if this was Christmas or New Year's, but I was doing a 12-hour shift, and it was the end of the day, and I got paged to a room, and I walk in and it was dark, and I sit down and I introduce myself, and I see a young man, and I say, my name is Wesley, I'm from spiritual care, I'm the chaplain here tonight. And he kind of takes a deep breath and he looks at me, and his first question was, where did you serve? And I was surprised. People have a lot of questions about who I am. Sometimes they're curious about my ethnicity. Sometimes they're curious about my religious tradition, but that was a first for me. Right off the bat, where did you serve? And then I took a closer look at the dark room. I should have been more observant when I walked in, but I looked around, and judging from the way he said it and his haircut, I assumed he was a military man. And then I looked a little further and I saw a sitter with him, and I assumed he had harmed himself. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mislead you. I have not served in the military. I'm a hospital chaplain. And he said, oh, well, I guess you want to know what I did. And at that moment, I was like, oh, I wish I had a group of colleagues to consult with. Or for those of you who have done CPE, I wish I could get a panel like this together to run a verbatim, to reveal all of the depth of meaning that was in just those first two lines from this guy. And it was revealed to me how little I knew about my patient's experience. There's always a gap between my experience and theirs. But this was a place where I really wish I had colleagues to call on, but I say better late than never. So maybe as a way to kick off, one of the things we talk about a lot in spiritual care training and work is trauma-informed care. And I'm curious, with the wisdom collected here, what you all would like to share that you've learned from your military service and also your spiritual care work. Maybe start us off with something that you've learned through your experience around human resilience, but also human vulnerability. I don't call on people. Go for it. Go for it.
I think I'm the least experienced up here.
No, I don't know about that, Brandon. I don't know.
So I think one of the things for me when I think about trauma-informed care, I think about the realization that everybody we encounter, especially in a clinical context, has possibly come across some form of trauma in their life, right? And this new kind of research area that's really beginning to pick up traction in trauma-informed care, I can't remember her name from UNC Chapel Hill, but she does a lot of research in trauma-informed care, especially through ACPE and whatnot. But trauma-informed care, I think having that lens of, okay, well, this person has a story, right? And when you're able to understand that this person has a story, it allows you to approach this type of care a little bit differently. And in realizing that we all have some form of trauma that we've encountered in a way. And as I was coming to the panel today, I was thinking to myself, I said, you know, chaplains are often overlooked in hospital, clinical contexts and whatnot. But one of the things that we can help prescribe or pull out of someone is vulnerability, right? And so if they are in the ER, if they're in the ICU, if they're on the cancer floor or whatever it is, if we can just create that space for vulnerability, I think that can do so much to their healing process.
Yeah.
I'm going to share stories when it comes to this end of the table, if you guys don't mind.
No, go for it.
I don't say that I have all the answers, but like all of you, we've all experienced different things. I can go to this one time. I was sitting in my office when I was in Iraq, and a young man came in my office and he wanted to talk to me about something that happened to him that he was unsure about. And this might be ethical, probably moral injury, but certainly traumatic for him. He had been on a gun truck. He was 18 years old. He was manning a 50 caliber machine gun. And back during that time, they had to go through the rules of engagement. It was shout, show, shove, shoot. But certainly a vehicle was coming up. Everybody had to remain 50 meters off of the convoy. And as the vehicle came up, he did all the rules of engagement, tried to wave them off. He did even a warning shot. And then the next shot that he did, because they continued to come, because everybody was at risk. You want to talk about vulnerability. There's that fine line, right? Who's more vulnerable at that moment? He shot a 50 cal round through the windshield. And the traumatic point for him was that he didn't know whether he killed someone that didn't deserve it. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to know from me, was he okay or was he not okay? Did he do it or not? Mm-hmm. And you want to talk about a traumatic event, it was traumatic for him. And so you asked the question, you know, should I have been a veteran or not, or in that experience can identify? Well, I'm a chaplain, we don't carry weapons. Mm-hmm. So I would never have that experience. Mm-hmm. But as all of us sit in that same seat, mm-hmm. the thing that we can do is to be present mm-hmm. with him in that moment, but also to share with him, for him, he did his job, right? He did his job. And so I was a young chaplain too, trying to figure it out, but mm-hmm. I was present in the moment for him and listened to his story and allowed him to unpack it, and also informed him and helped encourage him. You had a job to do. You did what you were supposed to do. Did your folks survive in that? And you know, it's kind of difficult in those moments to say what's the perfect answer. But we just sat there. He cried. I listened, and I went to the dark spaces with him. And I think that's the role of a chaplain, to be willing to go into the darkness and sit there with them in that space of the unanswerable question.
Thank you for that, Colonel Willis. You're right, 110% right. I work in an organization called the Road Home. It's up at Rush. We've been doing this 10 years. And so while you and your team would be talking to warriors about these questions real time, what happens at the Road Home is that these questions and these issues and the moral and spiritual injury that might still be there but has not been acknowledged or has not been able to be treated is still inside. And many times you box it, you bury it, you burn the treasure map, and you leave it because you have to continue on mission. Okay, that's what you're there for. You have a job to do, and chaplains know that. And so the comments about presence are huge. Being present. And another thing is, at least in my experience at the Road Home, I am the only chaplain in a very considerably large network called the Warrior Care Program. It's UCLA, Harvard, Emory University, and Rush. And the clinical care that these veterans and their families get is amazing. I'm so proud to be just a part of it. But like to Wesley's question, these vets, because they have been carrying this and it's become part of their narrative, and even if it's terrible, they're scared of change. Okay. They don't want to talk about it. And their experiences have been such, probably, that You know, if I tried to talk to somebody about this, like I tried to, say, my wife or my sister or whatever, they haven't looked at me the same way again. I'm not going to do that. I do not want to alienate the few people I have left in my life. So when they come to the road home, they can come and talk to me. Um, I'm just a chaplain, but as Colonel Willis said so well, I'm there. And I happen to be a vet too. And I explain it that we are all, regardless of conflict or age, we're a tribe. We are a tribe, and our right of our inclusion in the tribe is our service. And so having that, even if it's just a little itty bitty advantage, and that person can talk to myself, veteran to veteran, that can open some doors and knock down some walls and allows me to ask the question, how's your soul? And while my colleagues do all the kinds of things that they do so well with the brain.
Yeah.
Please. go
Yeah,
ahead.
one other thing that I'll say to that is and throughout my chaplaincy training, one of the things that I learned is that we are human beings and not human doings, right? That's this first thing. And then when I think about my military experience and I think about what vulnerability means, vulnerability is scary. It's scary for a lot of people, and especially people who have served in the military. Even it took me, I'm so glad that I became a chaplain after I got out of the military. I think that's what helped me keep my sanity going through CPE. But vulnerability is very scary. And then the second thing, the first thing that I said is human beings and not human doings. On Sunday night, I was working and I encountered a young man, and he was in the hospital with his wife. And when I walked into the room, he instantly just started crying. I mean, almost crying so much that he couldn't even really talk to me. That's how much he was crying. He was in so much stress and what he was going through. And I just sit there and listen to him. And what I realized, without even commenting on the tears that I saw, I noticed that he was used to being a human doing and not a human being. And so a part of my work with him was allowing him well, in a way, affirming him that it was okay to cry, because every tear that he shed took a piece away from him of his masculinity or whatever it may have been that was causing him to feel so tense and not wanting to let these tears show. And so the work was allowing him to be vulnerable and affirming that vulnerability to release some of this stress. And the reason I shared that story of this patient that I saw on Sunday night is because I followed up with him the next day. And when I followed up with him the next day, he was a total different person. And we were able to engage in conversation. And what I realized is that he said that he had served in the military. And oftentimes in the military, we are so used to being human doings that we lose access to being human beings. And so I say that came to mind as you all were sharing your stories about veterans. And so I'll leave it.
Please.
I want to pick back up.
Please.
That was great stuff, man. You mentioned that when you came in the room and he found out that you were a chaplain, he says, so I'm guessing you want to know what I did. You know, one of the things we discover about trauma is that trauma associated with trauma is shame, right? And we all know from reading, was it Brown, Rebecca Brown, Brene Brown? Yeah. She says shame is in the secret, but a part of the traumatic event, it's either the behavior as a result of the trauma or maybe the traumatic event itself, and that you survived it and your reaction to it is different from other people. For example, a lot of people may go through the same event, but not everybody responds to it the same. Like they don't feel like this guy's normal, and how come I'm not normal anymore? And so there's some, you know, while we have all this expertise up here on this panel, and as an educator, you know all the stuff that you can do. And we know that, you know, there's, you know, the spiritual disciplines of atonement and forgiveness. And we want to unpack that for those people, and it's there alongside the journey. But it's also the reality to try to normalize what you're experiencing is exactly where you're supposed to be for what you went through. You know.
Yeah, I'd like to follow this thread of connecting through both similarity and difference in experience. I was struck by, well, what all of y'all said, but there was a part, Mark Chaps, where you were saying, you said, in one sentence, you said, I'm a chaplain who happens to be a veteran. And then another point you said, I was able to talk veteran to veteran, right? And those are both true. Those are both true. And I'm struck that in the context that I've served as a chaplain, my connection with the personal experience has typically not been a prerequisite to that service. You know, I was a jail chaplain for some years. I have not been incarcerated. I worked as a chaplain for folks who were underhoused in homeless shelters, and I've been very privileged and fortunate. I have not lost my house. And when I go from floor to floor at the different hospitals I worked, I don't presume that if I don't have cancer, I can't be a good chaplain in oncology, or that, well, I was about to use pediatrics. I have been a child, but I'm not a parent. I'm not a parent, but I feel like I can work pediatrics. But I have a hunch, and it's a hunch out of ignorance, that it is different working with veterans, being a veteran. And I have a feeling if I said, hey, Chaps, let me into the road home, we're friends, we're colleagues, but you might have some questions for me about my qualifications.
Depending on what you want.
And well, you've read my mind, my friend. So if you don't mind starting us up, I'm with you that we're all chaplains, and 3 of you happen to be veterans. But also there is a work veteran to veteran that is different. And I would love if you would share your wisdom with us. Maybe we'll start with Chaps, since it was that turn of phrase that got me there.
Well, part of my work is to figure out, where do we start, okay, with where that veteran is. I have to meet them where they're at, not where I want them to be or I expect them to be. It's wherever they are at. So you have to assess that, okay? How bad is the wound? How deep does it go? How is the moral compass shattered? How is the faith lost, and why? Okay. And once you have some intel, you can start. You can start to kind of see where the path of least resistance might be. And that's where talking vet to vet can have the most advantage. Okay. Take the chaplain hat off. Okay. We're speaking as vet to vet, brother to brother, brother to sister, however it looks, however it works. That can be a huge, icebreaker. And it's proven to be the case for me in the almost 10 years I've been at the road home. And, that's when there's that trust, and when there's that recognition of shared experience, those walls come down, the trust comes up, and then you can, and this is where it becomes a privilege for me. They allow me to go with them and wade through those dark waters, and they know they're not alone. Okay, and that's pretty significant. And if we're talking about a moral or spiritual injury, the shame, the guilt, and the effects of that, the self-sabotage, the substance abuse, all those different things, screw you, God. When I was growing up, I was taught how to pray. If I prayed, what was supposed to happen? Well, God would answer your prayers, right? Well, God wasn't there when I needed God the most. That, to that individual, is a serious breach of trust. It breaks. So those are the kinds of things that being able to connect on those levels really, really can help, and help clear away a lot of the static, if you will, the background noise. I hope that.
Thank you.
I think being a veteran, well, I know being a veteran is an identity. And as human beings, we often look to connect with people who we identify with. And so if I'll speak from the context of working at the Department of Veteran Affairs, and there were chaplains who were not veterans. I mean, there were staff, nurses, doctors who were not veterans. But whenever you walked into a room, or if I was in the room with an interdisciplinary team, the veteran always wanted to know where everybody served, right? Because a part of providing that care, they want to find a piece where they can connect with you. And so whenever I would go and talk with veterans in VA, we have something like we have Chaps. It says veteran, right? And I think that piece allowed people to relax a little bit more. It's like, wow, maybe this person will see me for who I am. Maybe they can see the pain, or they can understand what I've been through, or my history, or what got me here in a way. And so I think to answer your question, Wes, is that being a veteran is just an identity. It's an experience that people often look to connect with someone who can often understand that experience that they're going through.
If I can jump in and
Please.
just restate it a different way. I don't want to say you took mine, but
Yeah.
I'll just say that credibility, I think, is a question. You know, so if you have different doctors come in, and or no, this one experience I had, I needed to go to a lawyer for something, and I looked on his wall to see where he went to school, and I saw where he went to school, and I was like, I don't know, but I think it's kind of that experience, you know, when you have the chaplain in a VA setting, a veteran setting. If he knows that you're a veteran, you're like, okay, yeah, regardless of what branch you were in, you know, you went to boot camp. We both understand boot camp. We both understand. So it's like a credibility thing. I think it opens the door as an access point to be able to talk to that particular patient's needs.
Yeah, the words I heard from all three of you was well, I'll see if I can do it backwards. So credibility, connection. I don't know if the word was said, but what I heard was a kind of safety, and specifically connecting it back to earlier part of safety from alienation, judgment. Maybe not safety from shame, but openness to receive it is what I heard. Well, how would you say that? How would you treat the shame? Because I also heard shame, guilt, moral injury. And I was wondering if it doesn't have to be directed at Chaps, but anybody wants to speak to how is that spiritual care situation different or not from other spiritual care needs that you've identified in your work?
Well, when we're talking about the shame, the guilt, moral injury, etc., that in my work is intertwined with the symptoms of PTSD. They're not, I do not believe that they are separate. They are intertwined because they are effects of the physical and psychological symptoms of PTSD, the hypervigilance, all of those things, the anger, all those things that happen that get you into a place like the road home. So I'm looking at effects. So why are you drinking so much? Why are you keeping the shades down in your apartment and a 9mm on your chair? Well, I don't want to go out. I don't want to see people, and I don't want to, forget it. I'm going to defend myself to the death if I need to. But why do you feel that way? Because I'm ashamed. That veteran is holding that in, and has been holding it in for a long time because of a traumatic act that they either participated in, witnessed, or maybe failed to prevent. But because you have to put the Band-Aid on so you can continue on what you're doing at the moment, okay, you kind of have to leave that. And because it's such a traumatic thing, you want to be able to forget about it if you can. But the effects of that, once that service member comes home, are just things like I just described. Or, self-sabotage. I am not worthy. Nothing good should happen to me because of how I feel and what I did. In my journey, There was a time when I felt I was beyond God's forgiveness. It put me in a real dark place. I couldn't talk to anybody about it. I was too scared to. So things like that. And again, trying to figure out where you start for me would be different for Colonel Willis. I mean, you're looking at more things real time, right? Where my colleagues and I are looking at things that might have taken 20, 30 years to come to the surface. Okay. Big difference there. And big difference because it becomes part of their narrative. Yeah, just leave it at that.
Yeah, when it comes to moral injury and considering an intervention for moral injury at the VA hospital, I think I did more group work than I did individual care.
Oh, can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure, I wouldn't mind. We did so much group work more than individual care, and the reason I bring this up is because we have more injury groups at the VA hospital, and the more injury groups are it's a chaplain and a psychiatrist who are the group leaders, and they lead that group. I think it's about maybe 9 weeks, I want to say, give or take. But there's other groups as well that we go through. Like I did SUD group, I did serious mental illness groups, folks with schizophrenia, and other identifying mental illnesses. But one thing about a group intervention that I think is very powerful is when, and it goes back to the previous question that we talked about connectedness and identity. And so whenever veterans are in groups with other veterans, when we're able to bring them together and draw them in together, when they're able to share their story with one another, that is the spiritual care. Not what the psychiatrist does, not what the chaplain does, but the care that they provide to one another is so powerful. To let them know that, oh, wow, I got out in 2010 or 1999, and I'm still struggling too in 2025. And so when they're able to communicate, and oftentimes, whenever I would do group work, you would throw the theme out there, and oftentimes you allow the veterans in the group to carry the conversation, right? You're not there to provide any one-on-one care or anything like that, but allow them to do the work amongst each other, right? And so a lot of the intervention, I cannot think of the one of the theories that I use where you're able to, it's called like linking, when you're connecting, oh, wow, did you hear what veteran so-and-so said? Does anybody else have that experience, right? And allow people to be more vulnerable and to open up and to share that experience. And so I think to your question, when it comes to moral injury and spiritual care, group work is really important. We don't typically see that too much in the private healthcare industry, but VA chaplains typically do a lot of group work, and that is a great intervention, I believe.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump right in.
Yeah.
We're talking about chaplains, and chaplains are different than social workers or psychologists, but some of those times the lines blend together. But as to your point about those groups, they're spirituality groups. I don't know what yours may be called, PTSD, but OTP, but they're spirituality groups, and the chaplain is there for a reason. And I just want to bring in the side of the component of a military chaplain. And, one of the overarching things that we carry with us is that we bring God to people and bring people to God. And I know as a CPE educator, that sometimes after they're talking and stuff, they realize that, God is present in the room because you're there, because I'm there. And I think that's something that we shouldn't skip over. The fact that when chaplains are in the room, we represent something that people either gravitate towards or push against, because where was God when all this stuff was happening to me? Or I don't even believe in God, but we're there to try to help them unpack and be present with them. And so some of the tools that I keep sort of echoing in my mind is, when you're dealing with the trauma, of course, is again, is forgiveness, compassion, love, confession. All of these things are available to the veterans when they're dealing with the chaplain. Because of course we can use acceptance commitment therapy, We can use CBT or CPT. You know, we can use all of these things, but what's different than the social group by itself is a spiritual group, which affirms that there's something outside of the norm that's present in the space. I'll give one quick story. When I went to Iraq the first time, I didn't know what to do. I was trained to do, but really, I was there with a transportation company and they were traveling up and down the roads. The bombs were made for them. So I went as we were sitting there in a mission brief. And during the mission brief, right after the mission brief, when they checked all their weapons and everything, this one soldier prayed. And 100% of everybody got in and did the St. Michael prayer. And I was like, I got it, right? And I'm thinking they have M4s, 50 cal, 249s, everything is there. But they knew that they needed something outside of what they could touch, feel, and see to usher them into the next phase. And we do the same thing psychologically, psychodynamically. And I know you help chaplains with that. And these gentlemen here represent something outside of what you can touch, feel, and see.
Better myself. Thank you. That was dead on. In our program, we'll have between 18 to 24 veterans, and sometimes they're service dogs. And we split them into two groups. And those groups stay together for the 2 weeks. I mean, day and night. And they stay in the Illinois guest house, which happens to be right across the street from Jesse Brown. Okay, so it's real quick and easy to get to Rush. And as much, if not more, therapy and healing goes on in the team room than it does at Road Home, because each veteran now has a group around them, and that veteran often comes to the Road Home feeling like, you know what, I think I'm the only one who's going through this, and you're not. And so that the shared credibility, shared experiences, all of that comes together very, very quickly. And it can really work wonders. Now, our clinicians, they're fantastic, but most of them are not veterans. But they establish their credibility with the vets in our program, in that I am here, I am committed to the mission of this program, and I am here for you. You are not alone. And that can be an icebreaker too, a very significant one. And thankfully, it's worked really well. But yeah, there's as much that goes on, if not more, outside. And I have a couple of groups, and we've been going on for several years. And yeah, I'll just throw a topic out there, and I'll just sit and drink my coffee and check my texts. They'll just take it and run with it. So yeah.
Thank you. I have only, one more, maybe two more questions. I just wanted to prime the pump for some storytelling, for some kind of laying some groundwork. I really want to hear from the folks who are assembled here. I see chaplains from a variety of contexts. I assume everyone here is interested they came here for something. So you're interested in some kind of intersection between spiritual care, military service, trauma-informed care, et cetera. And so if I see some people have been scribbling notes, if some of those notes have a question mark by them, I'm going to be asking you to join us in this conversation, or maybe you have a story that you want to join with this panel. But let me ask one more thing that kind of brings us all the way back to some of the first comments that Chaplain Willis, you made, and a few other folks did as well, about, life is traumatic. Like all people have been experienced or seen or vicariously and directly experienced trauma. And I think about some of the language we use, and I'm like, well, that describes most of my patients, most of the folks that I visited at Cook County Jail, most of the folks who lost their homes in this place. When I hear about the hypervigilance, or being a human doer and not a human being, or forgetting that you're a human being. When I hear about those sorts of symptoms and lives and identities, I'm like, these are the folks that come to this hospital for medical care. We accept them into our MDiv programs to educate them. We deploy them to the clinic and train them as chaplains. It's not us and them, right? It's a sense in which, oh, how do we cope with living? And so are there things, wisdom, experiences that you maybe have gained through your work that you'd like to share with us from outside the military community about this spiritual care work that we do? And then like a companion sort of follow-up question, or are there misconceptions about military life and service and experience that you'd like to clear up for us who are outside of the experience? They're two big questions. I threw them both out.
See, everybody's still thinking.
Go for it. Yeah.
What was the question?
Yeah. Well, maybe to some, because I made it really complicated. I think I was just sitting here as I was thinking about inviting questions from the audience. I sort of geared us in a direction towards, tell us what it's like to be a veteran working with veterans. And the more the conversation that unfolded, I'm like, the traumas you're describing are so common, even if military service is unique, that there are lots of folks who are hypervigilant, who are full of shame, who risk alienation through vulnerability, and who forget that they're human beings. Anything you want the non-military people in the room to know based on all the things that you've learned in your work?
Well, I don't know. I kind of took it a certain way.
No, take it whichever way you want. You're good.
Right. What people may have ideas about military chaplains, and I'm a pastor. I was a pastor first, and I'm still a pastor today. I pastor a church. Every weekend I have to write sermons. So chaplains write sermons, pastors write sermons, and I'll just tell this story real quick. I had when I was overseas, I had a soldier come to me and he says, "Hey, chaplain," and I had a concept too of what the military was, and I was trying to do it what my concept of what the military was, but it wasn't what the soldiers needed. And after one of the chapel services, the soldier came and says, "Hey, Chaplain Willis, we want to have church like we do at home." And I was like, got it. I can do that. You know what I mean? And so, it became a transformational moment, not just for me, but also for them, because we saw our chapel services just like explode, because we started including the things that they really needed, right? A lot of times, even as pastors, we'll have an agenda. We're the guy. But when it comes to like chaplaincy, the people are the guy, right? And that's sort of thing. So military chaplains will flip the script and like, you're the important person in the room. And that's really actually one of the things I really like about military chaplaincy is that doing religious stuff, I'm always around people that want to be there, right? It's not because they have a job there, they're paid, or they're volunteering or whatever. They come to chapel service or come to the chaplain because they want to be there and they want to heal. So that's amazing, amazing, amazing feeling to be in the presence of people like they may not even be really that deeply spiritual religious, but they're like, yeah, I want to be around this. And it's like, oh, wow, it's such an amazing work to be a part of it. So I think if anybody in here is even thinking about it, I'm telling you, it's the best job I ever had. Even though I'm a pastor and at the VA, being a military chaplain for females too, is the coolest thing to be able to serve. Again, the credibility. I'd say this real quick. I wanted to, because I just felt like there was a lot of pastors that call themselves pastors that didn't have education. Military chaplains are highly educated. Everything is based on their school. So not only do you have to have civilian education, but you have to have military education too. As a matter of fact, you can have civilian education, but you don't have the military schools, you're not going to get promoted. So you have to double it. And then I found out that in order to get to a certain rank, you have to have 2 masters. I was like, dude, I was like, sign me up. All right. So, I mean, I think that's kind of a misconception that people have, that maybe military chaplains are not as educated, or they don't know, or whatever. So, so it's really people centered, individual centered, and people focused, even more to the next level, I would say.
Thinking about my military experience, it was funny when Chaplain Willis said, "Yeah, they want to come to chapel." I remember in 2011 when I was in boot camp, and the first break week and I was at Paris Island was on Sunday morning. I mean, it was the entire base, all these young 18-year-olds to get away from the drill instructors. Everybody would march to church on Sunday, whether you had a religion, whether you believed in it or not. You would go there and sleep if you could, And so on Sunday mornings, that was kind of like our outlet, and everybody would go. So I thought about that, but it was a place of peace, of comforting for like that 1 hour, because we knew the drill instructors couldn't come in there, but we knew we could see them out the window. They were just waiting on us to get out of church, to get the day started. But one thing that I think about being in the military is that we often do, as a service member, we look, and I think I was telling Josh just the other day, is when we look to the military chaplain, we're looking for someone that we can identify with, right? Someone who can bring us a little piece of home and give us a little bit of comfort. So I join with the service members who are like, can you please just give me a little bit of something that I'm used to? Because that was me when I was serving, and when I was deployed. I missed my family so much that when I was on the ship, I was like, guess I'll go talk to the chaplain. And we had Bible studies, and I enjoyed that because it fed a piece of my identity in a way. And I also remember when I was in the military, people often like, you were in the Marine Corps? I'm like, yeah, I did. Yeah, I was. But a lot of people drew towards me in the military. Officers, I was this little 18, 19-year-old boy. I would talk with the pilots. One of my Captain Bagley, he was like, hey, Lance Corporal Evans, you want to go for a flight today? I'm like, yes, sir. Yeah, take me. So I would go fly with them, and things out of the norm. But one thing that I noticed is that they wanted someone who was authentic and vulnerable. And you don't really see that in the military. And so because I exhibited that, they were drawn towards that. It wasn't about the rank, it wasn't about the age. They wanted vulnerability because, again, we're not human doings, we're human beings. And at some point in our life, we all want to be connected with someone who is a human being. And so when it comes to chaplaincy, one of the most important things to me is that's why I got more than 4 units of CPE, because I really believe in CPE, is because when you know who you are, when you know yourself, all you have to do is show up, be authentic, and that allows something else to come out of that person that you're caring for. And so I share that to say that it's like, as chaplains, like aspiring chaplains, the best thing you can do is learn who you are and be present with those that you're caring for.
Yourself. Be yourself. Sometimes that isn't as simple as it sounds. Yeah, be yourself and meet whoever it is you are going to minister to where they're at, not where you think they should be. I'm going to be on call tonight at the hospital, and I'll do what I always do when a beeper goes off. I'll say a little prayer to the Holy Spirit when I'm at the doorway, because I don't know what I'm going to run into. Just be with me. And you walk in and that person sees that you're sincere, you want to be there, and you're genuinely interested. They don't feel alone anymore. And that can be the start of something really, really good. Same goes with the veterans. And the biggest difference is that I see anyway in my work is that these wounds and these other things that we've talked about have had time to scar. Okay, they're still in there, but they're scarred and they're buried and they're integrated and all of those other things. So you have to tweeze and pick things apart. And a lot of times with the veterans, it's helping them make meaning of their service. So identify a moral injury if there is one. Because if they're able to name it, they've just learned something really important about how they might have been feeling these past several years. Forgiveness. It's huge. You know, question that was asked of me by the man who I credit with saving my life. He asked me if I believed in God. I said, I don't know. I don't think he believes in me. And I had the same answer for Jesus Christ. And he looked me in the eye and he said, Mark, if those two were sitting in those chairs right there, and they were sitting here listening to our conversation, do you think it would be all right with them if you began to forgive yourself? It was a tipping point. It was a tipping point for me. And, you know, it helps. And then giving meaning and purpose to their service and their sacrifices and even their traumas can help heal. And I'm sure you're all familiar with Henry Nouwen, the wounded healer. Mm-hmm. They can become a wounded healer, and they can use their knowledge and all of that life experience to help others heal. And it becomes a circular pattern. The other thing about military chaplaincy that I found was, especially during COVID, at Rush, everything was quarantined and sequestered. We had a COVID relief team that I was part of, and it was mental health professionals and chaplains, and we would go take our carts with our LaCroix water and our treats, and we'd go up on the COVID floors. And these were the people that were at ground zero. And you could tell that they were suffering trauma and they were seeing trauma, and it was hurting. When a woman says, burst into tears and said, I am so tired of having to strip my clothes off in the garage and put on my bathrobe and run through the house to take a shower before I can even hug my children. Or another medical professional, like a doctor, he said, well, I think this is a 2 bottle of wine day. I'll take that as a win. So there was trauma, there was moral injury, there was spiritual injury there too. And what it taught me was that what we see, as far as the trauma from combat or military sexual trauma, we can all suffer trauma, okay? But the work that we do as far as working with trauma and healing, it's kind of been the bailiwick of the military, this PTSD and moral injury. No, everybody can suffer trauma. Everybody probably has. In their own way, they could have serious moral and spiritual injury. And avoidance is one of the benchmark symptoms of PTSD. Oh no, I'm fine. I'm throwing myself into my work. Or they're doing all these other things for other people because it makes them feel good, but they're avoiding their own pain and their own wounds. And so being able to take some of the things that I learned and we learned at the road home and apply it to the people at least at Rush and in the medical community there was really helpful. So it transfers, and you're doing it right.
Thank you. We've got a good chunk of time before we close, and I would love to get questions from folks who are gathered here, other stories that you want to share, points of connection. But yeah, let's open it up to folks who are here. Thank you, everybody. Oh, are you gonna? Oh, this feels great. Thank you, Madison, for moving the mic.
Hi, my name's Don. I'm a second-year MDiv student here at UChicago, and I'm also scheduled to start my chaplaincy internship at Emory Midtown Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia this summer. I really appreciated all of you for being here and your really vulnerable, heartfelt story. But I have to say there were moments where I got, say, triggered, for the lack of a better term. And it was in regard to finding theological God in times of suffering. But for me, as a non-U.S. military person, if a soldier with or a veteran with PTSD was to come to me and ask me why God would do this to me, my immediate reaction would be, God didn't do it. It was George Bush, Dick Cheney, military-industrial complex. And we can argue about whether my righteous anger is valid or not, but just in terms of more practical advice, how do you suspend your attitude toward the culprit, the cause of their pain, but like just focus on the client that's in front of you and just be present with him?
Can I jump into that one?
Yeah, no, jump in.
I know I keep telling these stories,
No,
but
keep doing it.
because it happened to me. I was in Iraq again, and soldier came to my room because he'd been talking to me at the chow hall and stuff like that, and he says, "Hey, chaplain, I want to bring some stuff to you." And then he brought me some DVDs and stuff, and he asked me, he says, "Hey, chaplain, why are we here?" And I was like, "What?" He says, "Why are we here?" And the crazy thing is, I never bothered to ask myself the question because I'm in a focused frame of mind. You get an order, you do what you got to do, you pack your bags, you go, you serve your country. That's it, that's all. But what that did was it allowed me to open my mind to the space of where other people were, right? Everybody didn't even join the military to be in a war or whatever else. I didn't either, but I had a chaplain. I was told I would never go. I signed up for school and they told me I would never deploy, and here I am. But it was to your point on the question of some of the ideological beliefs. It was coming from that space. I didn't enter into, as the chaplain for that soldier, what I believed or try to change his belief. I allowed him to unpack and be present and to do what he needed to do to feel whole and safe, because my number one job is to make sure psychologically, emotionally, and even spiritually, especially from my perspective, that they would survive it all regardless of where they sat, right? To get them home so that their mother, their father, their girlfriend, their significant other, their children would be able to receive them safely. So I listened to their story. I journeyed with them. I did some reading and was able to have an informed conversation with them. But I didn't put them down. I didn't give them an order. Chaplains don't do that anyway. But I didn't tell them to shut it down. I was there with them. And we became great friends, and they continued to share, and I continued to read, and we had good conversation.
That's a really great question, and good luck on your journey to chaplaincy. One of the things I learned on my chaplaincy journey is I remember when I wrote my first verbatim, and I kind of encountered a situation where like that. It was like, well, why am I feeling this? Why would God do this to me? And I remember writing in my verbatim, it's like, oh, I made the patient feel good. And I learned very quickly that that was the wrong thing to do. To Chaplain Willis' point, is because as a chaplain, we're not necessarily there to take a person away from their pain or to pull them away from whatever their experience is. But one other thing that I was thinking about too, as we was talking about, we didn't talk a lot about grief when it comes to trauma care, right? And so if someone is in that suffering space, if they're in some type of emotional pain, my job as a chaplain isn't to pull them away from what their experience is, but yet to listen and to affirm them in what their experience is. Because oftentimes the culprit is that people feel bad for how they're feeling, right? And as a chaplain, if you will begin to see the power of the intervention of active listening. If you go read all my chart notes, that's probably the number one intervention that I put, is I sit there and I listen. Because oftentimes people want someone to hear their story. And so I don't necessarily go in, I remember, like I said, that first verbatim, you go in, it's like, oh yeah, patient was smiling. Yeah, they were happy when I left, but it's like, that's not good chaplaincy. Good chaplaincy is when you're able to listen and affirm that person in the suffering and the pain that they're going through and let them know that you are human. Your questions are valid. And it's okay to explore in the way that you would like to explore.
I also wanted to say, just because I'm a CP supervisor, I didn't want to miss the chance. Don, you made some remark. You said something like, tabling the issue of whether my anger is valid. Your feelings are valid.
There's nothing I could add. These two answers were fantastic. The only thing possibly would be what I saw in both these answers was how many service people think, okay, there's God, there's the flag, there's the United States, apple pie, Mickey Mouse, and all the rest. But when it comes down to it, it's the people who are closest to you that mean the most to you in these circumstances. That's who you care about, and that's who you're going to grieve about. And yes, your thoughts may be valid. They may not be valid. I don't know. But again, you're taking them where they're at and creating a sacred space for them to be able to do it. And you see how a lot of this will distill down to its lowest common denominator, which is the individual, the family, the mother and father, the sister and brother, the wife, the kids. That's what it's all about. And when you have grief on the battlefield, or when you have grief in the hospital room, yeah, you have to be there. And just being there can be enough. You may not think so, but it can be enough.
Other questions, concerns? Ooh, Chaplain Torres.
Thank you. Do you see because you're, the population you're serving are veterans. Do you see a disparity of care from like currently serving and then that transition post service? And, if you were in the capacity to change that, what would that look like? And I asked this question at the panel on Veterans Day, but I'm curious just to know what your perspectives are. Does that question make sense?
Yes. So I'll start. I got out of the Marine Corps in 2015, and I think that was probably one of the hardest times of my life, transitioning from active duty. And that's where grief came to mind, because when I look back now, that liminal space between active duty and figuring out what's next after active duty is traumatizing within itself. Because when you get off of active duty, you turn in your ID, and you basically, at that point, you can't even get back on base, if you're not retired or something like that. And so it's basically like, hey, enjoy life, and I was 22 years old. And When I look back now, I didn't realize it at the time. I was grieving so much. There was so much grief wrapped up in that transition because from 18 years old, a high school who had just graduated, to 22 years old, I had been taken care of. Everything, someone told me what to do, someone told me to go, what to wear every day. You know, all of these decisions were made for me to some degree, right? And so when I had to figure that all out at 22 years old, I was scared, I was nervous, I felt vulnerable to the world. I didn't know where to start, and I grieved. And one of the things I remember, I got denied from my first job. Thought that being a state trooper was the best thing to do because it would give me like this military kind of paramilitary experience. They was like, nope, too young, or whatever it was. And so I ended up applying to college. And that was not on my to-do list is to go to college, but I applied to college. And when I got accepted into undergraduate, I remember I was like, well, I don't know what college is. My parents didn't go to college. I don't know what this is going to look like. But I remember that I marched in the band in high school. And I was like, that gave me structure and discipline. So I remember I was sitting at my desk in Cherry Point, North Carolina, and I was like, who's the band director for North Carolina Central University? And I emailed the band director and was like, I am transitioning out of the military. Can I march in the band? I hadn't played tuba in 5 years. He was like, sure, come on in, we'll work with you. And so for me, I had to seek out that help in my transition period, which was marching in the band. And so what helped me transition to kind of pull me away from that Marine Corps lifestyle was marching in the band, finding that place where I grieved the lack of community. I didn't have community because in the Marine Corps, you have your unit, you have the people that you hang with, that you have fun with in the barracks, right? I no longer had that, but I found that in the band. Those that I marched with in college, I joined organizations in a way. And so there is a lack with service members who are exiting out of active duty to where they are now in life. And veterans has the highest suicide rate, right? At one point it was 22 veterans a day. And to be honest, I think that's why. It's because there's no help. We're putting veterans out there to the world very vulnerably. And a lot of people don't have the capacity to try to figure it out or have the resources or the support to say, all right, well, if this doesn't work, have plan B, and sometimes I think that I'm an anomaly because at one point I was just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I live in the back of my car or something, but it is very hard. There needs to be some type of support system, spiritual care, connect them to chaplains at the VA during their transition period or whatever it may be to kind of help them with that grief with leaving active duty, because there is so much grief that service members encounter when leaving service. No matter how bad or good it is, there is going to be some grief there.
Absolutely. A significant amount of work with the veterans at Road Home that I do has to do with what I call Tango Mike Papa. And it's something that, the phonetic alphabet we all remember: task, meaning, purpose. When we were in the military, we had meaning, we had purpose, right? And we certainly had plenty of tasks, right? And it gave us a sense of belonging, accountability, pride, all those things, those soft skills, right? And now you don't have it. You're literally a ship without a rudder. What are you going to do now? You're grieving. Absolutely. It's loss. Okay. We were doing something that we love doing for the most part. And, I believe grief is love that no longer has a place to go. And we're seeing more and more active duty personnel in our program, and they are preparing to transition, or they're in the process of transitioning. And they all have this fear. What am I going to do now? So a couple of things is, how to make meaning and purpose. I asked the question, well, what brings you joy? Obviously playing the tuba gave you joy, right? You just hadn't done it in a long time. Okay. And these service members and veterans will say, well, I look for old motorcycles that aren't running anymore. I put them back together and give them to vets. One of the biggest things that vets love to do, and the soldiers the active duty soldiers that we talk to, gardening. They get in the dirt and the mud and all of that, but they're creating something, okay? They're creating something, and that has a very deep spiritual meaning for a lot of them. And it's like, yeah. And so when it's done, I can give this food that I helped create to my family and friends. So reconnecting with meaning and purpose is huge. And if I if I had my druthers, I'd ask the military to help with that on the front end, like as they're transitioning out, before they transition out, let them know that, hey, this very well may happen. So do you have a plan? Do you have things that you might want to pursue? Are there are there places you can go? Are there people you can see? Because when that grief hits, it's not only traumatizing, but it inhibits you. You feel like you don't really want to do anything. And then that can be a slippery slope.
Is that a hand? Two hands.
Hello, my name is Elena. I'm a first year MDiv student. Thank you so much for being here. I'm hoping to do CPE next year, so I'm soaking it all in. I have two questions. Feel free to choose or ignore any of them.
We will not ignore them.
The first one, I'm really interested in being with people at the end of their life. So I'm curious about the transition from the palliative care conversation, specifically for veterans. What comes up? Are there concerns, other fears that we haven't talked about today that just really come up in those conversations, or are particular barriers? That's the first question. And then the second question, I'm really curious about the Wesley's story. The second question, like how you would unpack that when the patient said, what do we say? I'm assuming you're going to ask what I did.
Yeah.
I was just curious about what's happening there. How was that veteran received before by other care members that made him ask that question? Like, what's going on there?
I would think that veteran wasn't received very well, or there was something somewhere in an interaction that he had previously that triggered him in some way, which is very possible. So there's that. But in the end of life chaplaincy that I've done with veterans, they're afraid of death, and they're at a time in their life where they can finally admit it. So that's one thing. But a lot of them haven't told their story. And you definitely found that in the generation Second World War. My father didn't tell his story for about 50 years, and when he did, it blew my socks off. And they've kept it in. They haven't been able to tell it, or they feel that it would be wrong to tell it, or it'd be embarrassing or whatever. So encourage them, tell your story. You have a story that deserves to be heard, and your loved ones, if nobody else, deserves to listen. Okay?
Yeah. And I'm going to answer briefly also, but I know there's other hands that I want to do that before I have time. What you want to know, like what happened in that story? Is that what you're asking? Oh, let me say this then in brief so we can get to that. So he had said, once I realized he had a sitter in the room and he was on watch for self-harm, he said, oh, so I guess you want to know what I did. Go ahead and ask your questions. And I said, well, actually, no, I don't need to know what you did. I just want to hear whatever you want to tell me. And we had a good long conversation, and I didn't tell you this. You were coming on shift after me. Did we talk about this? No, okay. Yeah. So Brandon was coming in on shift after me, and one thing you'll learn in hospital chaplaincy, you don't promise other people's time. I'm never like, oh yeah, Brandon's coming in, he's real good, and he's got nothing to do at 7 p.m. Like I'll never put him on the spot like that. But I said, when we talked for a while, and then I said, when I first sat down, you asked where I served, and I told you I haven't. Would you like to speak to someone who has? I don't know if I can arrange it, and he said, no, I think I'd rather talk to you. I was honest. There was another hand, I think.
Don't need that, but just in case.
Oh yeah,
live
there's
streaming.
internet
Okay.
people who are enjoying this.
The conversation that you had about transition away from the military. We have a very good technology for turning civilians into warriors, but not one for turning warriors back into civilians. And I was in the Southeast Asian misunderstanding. And when I got out, I got an early out to go to school. And I remember being with undergraduates, and it wasn't so much that we spoke a different language, like we were from different planets. It's like the kind of things that the people around me were worried about and concerned about, I just couldn't make that happen. It was like, really? That's it? Okay. And so that feeling of isolation is another piece that hits when transitioning out.
I'm glad you said that. When I was tasked to moderate this panel, I was very excited about the connections between military service and military chaplaincy and the work I do at the hospital. But I've actually felt a lot more connections with my work with incarcerated communities as a jail chaplain, and that work with returning citizens, as we call them. We've retired the language of ex-con, but that the need to care for returning citizens feels so similar to Brandon, the kind of grief you were talking about, even down to the particulars of like, I've never had to worry about what to wear, or where to eat, or like where to go, or like my time is accounted for. Like, you want structure, get incarcerated, go join the military, and the grief of being given all that freedom, the way you spoke about it reminds me so much of some of the work I've done. So, thank you.
Yeah, and I spoke to just the difficulty, and I'll share this story, and I share with Josh. Well, I do want to answer the question about palliative care. That is such a great field. I think that death and dying is so sacred. And so when I was at Vanderbilt, I took multiple classes on death and dying because it's a part of life, right? And I always share with families whenever they hear someone is dying, or if someone is come to me and say, the doctor just told me I have 2 weeks to live, right? And it's like, they look healthy, but you don't know what's going on inside. Death and dying is very sacred, and I'll leave that there. But the transition piece, the story, I remember when I was deployed in 2013, and I looked at, there was so much going on, and they put our ship on alert 120, right? They were like, all right, everybody needs to be ready to go in 120 minutes, alert 120, get your bags ready, line up, ready to go, because when it's time to go, it's time to go. And I remember they called my entire unit, they called us to the flight deck of the ship, and we was in a school circle, and the sergeant major and the commanding officer, they all came and talked to us, and the sergeant major gave us this powerful speech. I mean, the speech was so powerful that it was like, oh, I'm ready. I can just jump off the water and swim to the coast. I mean, jump off the ship and swim to the coast. That's how motivating the speech was, right? And I was like, oh, wow, yeah, that's going to be me. I want to be able to motivate people like that. But when it comes to belonging, thinking about belonging and grief and all of that, when I got out in 2015, that sergeant major got out about 2 to 3 years after me. And within a year of him retiring out of the Marine Corps, he died by suicide. And that was because, and from my own perspective, is he no longer had that community, that belonging that the military offered. And I think we, like when you think about transitioning warriors to civilians, that is an industry that we have not tapped into, that we need to tap into, because so many people come to that pipeline, who don't have access to the resources that they need. And when we don't have the resources, or we lose that belonging, we kind of implode in a way. And one thing I'll share this will probably be my last comment, the way I can give everybody else time to speak, but I remember when I got out, this was actually the December before I got out because I was just losing my mind, like, what am I gonna do? I came up with this acronym. We love acronyms, we love letters, you know, like Chap said here. I came up with this acronym BUILD. And this has really kept me to the day. And I challenged myself to build daily. And the B in build is being bold every day. The U is being unique. The I is being intentional. And the L is being loving. And then the D is to be determined to build every single day, to be bold, to be unique, to be intentional, and to be loving every single day. And that has also helped me in my transition out of active duty.
So we're coming close to time. Is that right? Okay. And I know there's folks, my guess is right outside the door, ready to take a class that's apparently happening in the same space. So I'm sure there are other questions there, and I'll defer to our host here. Is there a place we can congregate to keep the conversation going, or do we just need to get out of here? Who's running the show? Okay. So here's what I'm gonna do. If you all have time to stick around for a minute,
I just have 30-second
go
comment.
for it. You got it. You got it.
The other thing that I do when we're working with this issue
Yeah.
is there's two books that I recommend. One is by Sebastian Junger. It's called Tribe.
Mm.
The other one is by a gentleman named Admiral McRaven. He was um, he commanded the SEALs, and I don't know, a supreme commander in Afghanistan. Anyway, he commanded the SEALs and the special operations units in Afghanistan when bin Laden met his end. Okay, he was asked to do a speech at the University of Texas at their commencement about how to live a productive life, and this turned into a book that he wrote. But he said, "I'll keep it simple. The first thing you do is make your bed." And that's the name of the book. Make your bed, and then go brush your teeth and go get dressed. Eat your cereal. Da 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 da. And before you know it, you have 6 things done, and you can feel good about that, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the 2 books that I'll recommend.
Okay. We're going to have to bring this to a close. Thank you, Chaplain Torres. Thank you, Kate. I know Chaplain Torres has materials over there you should check out. Chaps brought some materials. For those of us, if you want to keep this conversation spilling into the public square, we're going to be right outside. We look forward to talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Wes.
so much. It was.